can see you. What? They can't see us.
We can see somebody.
Yeah, and she can hear you too.
We can see you okay. Welcome, Janie, Devin, Marlea. We're just waiting on Yasmin. We'll give her a minute and get started.
Your point.
They can't.
Janie, don't you love having kids to help you? It's awesome.
Yeah, I can't do it without them.
I had to have my kids help me with PowerPoint. I'm like, what do I do?
Yeah.
My husband tried to help me with Excel stuff back in the day, but he doesn't explain it very well, so I took a class instead. So anyway, we are going to go ahead and get started. We have, hopefully you had a chance to read through the case and look through the questions posed to the group for the case. I'm hoping, if you guys are okay with it, to spend the last couple minutes talking about prepping for the Doohickey assignment. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be really helpful.
All right, good. And then we'll just pop Yasmin in when she gets here. Hopefully we get her on here pretty quickly. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at what the group discussion leader paperwork looks like. It's broken down into sections and questions and some time suggestions. So, and there's a lot of material, so hopefully it all kind of blends into the 1 hour that we have. Anyway, it also suggests that that the discussion leader asks a question of one person and then asks other people to give input after that on the different things. So I'll just take turns asking you guys some questions. The main point to try to figure out what the main problems are and discuss some solutions at the end. So Devin, I'll go ahead and start with you. Did the varsity members engage in too much conflict overall? We'll need your mic. Your mic's not on.
Sorry. Okay. Conflict. When I think of conflict, one of the questions on there is like, when should coach have intervened? And dealing with conflict, the varsity members with conflict among themselves, they first said, we should have beat them by a bigger margin in their Atlanta trip or whatever. And I think that's when Coach P should have first come in at that conflict. Does that make sense? I don't know if...
Yeah, actually I have that marked. Let me read that little bit just briefly. When the team arrived back at campus, Coach P found that some of the varsity boat members appeared unhappy and critical of one another and were saying that they thought they should have beat the JV boat by more. What are you guys' thought on that conflict and on Devin's assessment of that conflict?
I think right then and there, if I was a coach, I probably would have intervened, just because you can't start out a team that's going to work together based on conflict.
What kind of conflict? They mention here that there's different kinds of conflict. So is there productive conflict? Is there such a thing as productive conflict?
Oh yeah, I believe so. In an office for sure, because you're going to use a whole bunch of different ideas that make conflict your own. But lots of times when you listen to opposing ideas, that helps you like better your area that you're working in. I think conflict can be really productive sometimes.
Yeah, that they mention that as they call it in the paperwork, task conflict, when you disagree with how something should be done. And then the other, what's the conflict that is more difficult to overcome? I mean, that task conflict can be difficult, but there's another layer. What's the layer of conflict we're looking at with this team, with the varsity team? Anybody have any thoughts on that? It said, because I kind of focused first on the fact that they, were saying, hey, we could have done better, which is a we statement, right? It's like, hey, we could do better. The coach wasn't worried about it because they said we could do better, which sure, great. They're competitive. But the sentence before that says they appeared unhappy and critical of one another. So there's some interpersonal stuff going on that maybe the task conflict of how to drive the boat isn't as much an issue as there's another layer of conflict going on that maybe the coach didn't recognize up front. That, because I don't know, it seemed to me that he'd been coaching for a long time. He'd done put teams together before. Why didn't he recognize the disjointedness of the team in general?
He had other specialists helping him too, didn't he? Other coaches, he asked for help.
Well, later on, yeah. You wonder why did it, like, one of the discussions I had with my husband is, at what point, like Devin, you said, what point do you step in? So you look in retrospect at any conflict and you say, well, here's a point that would have made a difference, and here's a point that would have made a difference. But really, should he have stepped in at that point? I mean, don't we kind of let things, try to let a leader kind of emerge from conflict? They seem competitive. I mean, it's not going to go perfectly, waiting to allow that, I mean, to kind of become something else. I mean, is that reasonable?
Yeah, like in retrospect, that's where I would have stepped in, but if I were him, I would have let it just go, I would have thought that was going to be like some constructive conflict, but like you pointed out, that they were unhappy and critical of one another. You need to have some humility in it, and just realize that you yourself can do better for the team, so that the sum of the whole is greater than you.
Yeah, I liked that thing they put on about the plow horse. That a plow horse it's amazing what two can do. They can pull 4 times the weight than they can pulling alone, even though there's only 2 horses. So I thought that was interesting. So I'm going to move on to, welcome Joseph, by the way, to Janie. What role did trust play in the problems the varsity crew was facing?
Well, that seemed to be the biggest point, to have trust in their team, because they all felt like they were the ones pulling and no one helping. And so,
did anybody think it was interesting that they said that no matter what was going wrong in the boat, if you're in the boat, you can't tell who is causing the problem in the boat?
yeah.
Did anybody catch that? That something's gone wrong and you're trusting that they make an adjustment. So
and you do nothing, just keep doing your job and hope they get back on the right balance or whatever.
So
how do you get people to have trust? How do you help them have trust in each other? That seemed to be the main problem.
It seemed like something had definitely broken down. In fact, the more I thought about it, the more I thought something broke down in winter conditioning. It seemed fine at the August camp, right? I mean, they competed, he put them in their boats, they won in the final racing in August, and then they come back from winter conditioning and something's gone on that they are in conflict already with each other individually somehow, because there's already a blame game being played. I just thought something, what do you look for at the beginning of something, that far out to see whether or not the team stuff is working out. So speaking of back to trust, what do you think happens if he replaces one of the people on the boat? What happens to trust? Joseph, I'll put that to you.
Sorry, I had to unmute my microphone.
No problem.
I just think I'm kind of like on the fence as to whether that would be a good thing or a bad thing, because you see so many issues, even with certain people that are kind of out of line. They had that one rower that was just he was pretty arrogant and he was being very rude. So you would have to ask, what would that do to trust? Would that, for me as a team member, if I was a member of that rowing team, I would almost see that maybe as a sigh of relief, kind of like, the bad guy's gone, but I'm really not sure. I'm trying to look at my notes, and it does say that the crew boat is only as strong as its weakest link. So I think it really depends on how competitive this coach really wants to be, because I think he could keep the player and no one's feelings would be hurt, but I don't think they would be quite as competitive as they could be. I don't think they would reach their full potential if he continues to just let it go on, because it's been going on for months now. And I think that a couple of the players are really kind of causing some of the main issues.
What have thoughts on what happens if he replaces a team member and the trust involved there? Does anybody else want to share their thoughts on that?
When I was thinking of that, oh, sorry, you can go.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Marlea. We'll let Devin wrap up.
But when I read that, the first thing that came to my mind was, would it be a punishment for the JV team though? Because their team is working really good together. Would you want to punish them and switch out their team even though they work so hard? And then if you did do that, would the varsity team look at that JV player, and would they accept them, or would they just look to him as, I don't know if they would accept him,
That's a good point. Welcome, Yasmin. Go ahead, Devin.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, that that it would kind of diminish your trust as the varsity team if you had one of the JV players, and it would kind of put your morale down. And the JV players either excited or sad to be there because they've been winning, and now he might be losing. And I mean, the whole point of the team is to.
Did you lose me, or did we just lose Devin?
I don't know. I'm still here.
Well, okay. So I'm still here. Devin checked out. So we'll let him come back in. Oh, sorry, Devin. We lost you there for a sec.
Oh, sorry. I don't know when.
Well, just you were kind of saying similar to Marlea, just that it would upset. There was already a really cohesive team it seemed like in the JV. Why punish them? I kind of thought the same thing. But did anybody notice? I noticed two things that I thought were interesting. One, that initially it wasn't that the JV team was going faster in the spring camp. The varsity team was going slower. That was one thing. And the second thing that stood out to me was when they shared the email from the varsity team, that they said, we only shared one, but this is indicative of all. And that spoke to me of, there is no one problem. There's no one person. They're all complaining about each other. This one email talked about this, I can't have this guy in my boat, and I usually get along with everybody. But everybody's emails were indicative of, and in general, I took it as they were all complaining about each other, more so than just one guy, that they all just there was just absolutely no cohesion. But I thought those two things were interesting because, because one of the questions is, how did the varsity problem evolve over time? Do you want to take that one, Janie? Or Janie, I already started a question with you, huh? I'll let Marlea take that one. Janie, did I have you take a question?
The one on trust.
Oh, that's right. So Marlea, if you wouldn't mind, how did the varsity's problem evolve?
I think what I thought is that the problem came from when they started losing to the JV. They really got it in their heads, and they started like looking for blame as to why they were losing. And I think that right there, then they started to not trust each other. Started to look for the blame instead of putting it like, what can I do better? What can we do as a team? Instead of they're looking at, you did this wrong, and that's why we didn't lose, or that's why we didn't win. And that's kind of what I got out of it.
How do you think that affected, Marlea? So you start out with, they lose to the JV team, they start to play the blame game, and then, the coach is trying to make adjustments, he's trying to figure things out, and he goes to the email issue, and how, did you see an evolution there as well? Like an increase, a decrease, did you see any development in that area?
For the conflict, you mean?
Yeah, like how did the conflict develop from, the point where they're losing and the coach is trying to help them with conditioning, and he's going through like having a psychologist come in, and as they kind of move through to this kind of the critical point that we get to at the end. Did you see it like, how do you view the evolution of the problem?
Oh yeah, I think it got worse even from the email, and then even to the day before, when they couldn't even sit at the same picnic table as each other.
Right. Yeah.
And so like it kind of got to an extreme where they were no longer a team, it was themselves as their own team. And I think it was just kind of a breaking point at every point along the way.
Anybody have any thoughts on that, on the evolution of the conflict with the varsity team, or on the opposite side, the evolution of the JV team? I mean, because they both have similarities, if opposite, still opposite, directions.
So I was thinking that maybe part of the evolution of the problem, I think it could have been an issue with leadership too on the coach's part. Because, I mean, we read that there were no leaders on the varsity team, there was just a bunch of disruptors. So you have to ask yourself, at what point in time does the coach step in and take that sense of leadership for the team? And kind of going back to the last question that you asked me about, if someone was cut from the team, would that lose a sense of trust? As I kind of thought about it, I thought back to high school sports, and I thought back to the point that if someone was a problem maker, feelings weren't exactly in the coach's heart. If you were kind of a problem issue, you would be cut from the team. And that was kind of your own fault. And, there's plenty of other people that would want your spot. So, I mean, thinking about it, I just kind of wonder what the coach could have done differently to instill a sense of unity within the team, because sometimes a coach isn't just about being a leader, but it's about bringing people together. And I kind of thought about maybe there's different team skill, team activities that you could do with one another to try to raise that sense of trust. But I kind of wonder now if it's gone so far that it's kind of like almost unmanageable. Do you think it's manageable now, or do you think it's just gotten so bad that it's kind of at a loss for everyone?
It's a good question. I think like what Devin was saying earlier, when he would have when he would have intervened or when he should have intervened, the coach picked the same time. Devin, he said, I should have seen the omen right there, right out of fall camp or winter camp, whatever. I should have seen it. Because in retrospect, he somehow recognized there was no leadership evolved out of that. There was no leadership. And so he kind of let that leadership thing, kept waiting for that to evolve and kept trying to develop it, but it never really did. So I think that's a great point. Anyone else want to share any thoughts on that, kind of that spiral downward or spiral upward? Because I think the JV team started improving. The JV team was getting better and better. What was their chant? Nothing to lose. And they couldn't even get a cohesive vision, from the other team.
Sort of gave them a goal to work harder.
I'm kind of, this was an interesting case study to read. So we can shift from, talking about the conflict and the type of conflict and the task, they were obviously, being critical of each other about how they were getting things done, but they really weren't communicating because interpersonally they were breaking down or whatever. So we can move on to part 2, which is and we'll go with, we'll come back to Devin. What should the coach have done differently And as he talks about this, kind of start to move outside of the box. It really think if it was you, pick a spot in the time, and what could he have done differently? What exact point do you think he should have done it? And try to be specific. So again, what should he have done differently? When, and what should that have been?
So, from my understanding, they took the top 8 performers from the camp, with an exception of 2 people. Is that correct?
Yeah.
For the varsity. So, I mean, physical skill, that's what this. I can hear you. Can everyone else?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, we do have Yasmin is having a hard time, I think. Yasmin, can you hear us yet? I'm getting text from her saying she can't hear us.
Because she just said something asking if we could hear her, and I could, but
I didn't hear. Hopefully we
Okay.
can get that ironed out. Go ahead, Devin.
because physical ability, physical strength, that's what it's about, but it's also about, like we've been talking about, leadership and other psychological factors. Maybe I don't know if I would have even picked those top 8 people based on just those parameters. Maybe included some other things earlier on, like leadership skills and such.
That's a good point. I was thinking he'd done this a million times before. He's been doing it for decades. It just makes you wonder why this year was so different. He was probably flummoxed too. That's a good point, that maybe he didn't recognize the lack of core leadership at the front end. What do you guys think? What should the coach have done differently?
Just an idea, maybe a question. Yeah. What if he would have started with team building activities or team building something at the beginning to get them unified? Didn't always just work so much on just rowing and competing and winning. What if they actually did stuff as a team that got them to know each other, understand each other?
It makes me wonder what he did or didn't do. I don't know that. I don't think it addressed anything in that August camp about whether or not they worked on something outside of just, like Devin was saying, just the kind of who's conditioned the best to fit in this boat, in this, in the physical aspect. Any thoughts, Janie or Joseph?
Well, this sort of reminded me of a church calling. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, of having a counselor that's trying to do everything and pull everyone else, and another counselor wouldn't do anything. And I felt like I was in the middle, frustrated, pulling one back, pulling the other along. And yeah, my son told me a book that he read. You have to get the right people on the bus and the wrong people off.
It's called Good to Great. It's in one of my classes right now. I'm having to read that book right now.
And so, yeah, I thought the coach should have changed sooner the people on the team. But it's not always easy to do.
Do you think that's fair to the JV team, though?
No, because they liked being with each other. They had a goal together.
I'm going to do a re-invite on Yasmin.
But it wasn't fair to the varsity team either to have all of the disruptors either.
Does anybody feel like they were all just kind of feeding off each other? There was no one. I believe it said there was no main one disruptor, and there was obviously no leadership. There was just, So what do you do if you don't take away from the JV team? What do you do with this varsity team? They are your 8 guys. Is it too late to do relationship building activities? Is it too late to do the team building that Marlea was talking about? Is it? Yasmin, can you hear us now? Yasmin? Okay, we'll wait on that. Joseph, what do you think the coach should have done?
I think from hindsight, I think that, we keep asking about the feelings of the JV and the varsity. And I think it's important to remember that no one is forcing them to do this. They're here on their volunteer, on their own merits. I like to think of this team as almost like a corporation. So if you have two finance divisions in a corporation and one of them is performing poorly and the other is performing, at a matter of excellence, what do you do as the boss? Do you let one of your finance divisions die out and just, completely go bottom up? Or do you make some necessary changes that's important to the survival of both divisions? And I think looking at it in a corporate hindsight, I think that's what I would get is, at the end of the day, people might be bummed out. I mean, people at one finance division might have friends in that division and friendships might be in the other one. But at the end of the day, I think it comes down to the overall health of both of those teams. And that's kind of how I'm seeing it with this varsity rowing. One of the things that I noticed is that Coach P, he said that he saw the agony of a physical loss, and he saw crushed spirits with hollow stares. And I was looking back, and one of the 4 categories to being successful at rowing is not just strength and conditioning. So kind of going back, we know that he chose those 8 rowers kind of off their strength and conditioning skills for the most part, but there's 3 other aspects to being successful at rowing. And that's your technique, your psychological dimensions, and your program's organization. So I think the psychological dimensions, I think towards the end, the varsity team is mentally drained. Like he said, he looked at crushed spirits, hollow stares. And when he asked the group of 8 boys what to do, all of them were dead silent, and a few of them muttered quiet, unemotional expletives. So that's not exactly the health that you want to have for any sort of your team, because like I said, strength and conditioning is only one of the aspects. You still have your technique, your psychological dimensions, and then you're also your program's organization.
Is it too late?
Towards the end of this article, I think it is to completely restore any trust. I think that there were plenty of opportunities throughout the case study where the coach could have taken that leadership role and maybe done team building exercises or even got them in more of a social atmosphere with one another, really create some, good relationships. But I think towards the end of this, I don't even think they can't even stand to look at each other. They can't sit with one another. Everything one another does, whether it's good or bad, it seems like someone else is being critical. So I personally think it might be too late. I mean, it won't hurt it wouldn't hurt to try, I don't think, but I think that he is now in over his head a little bit more than if he had done this, a little bit sooner.
Yeah, I was thinking, I looked back on it and I thought, we talked about this just briefly. I don't know that I would have done it differently than him initially. He's done this before. He has, in general, expectations of always produced leaders and great teams. And so, at first he lets it ride out. He's like, let's get him motivate him to get better conditioned. Come on, let's get that motivation that says, I can do this. And then he's like, he knows there's psychological aspects, of course. I mean, there's books written on how to deal with the psychology of a 8-man crew. I didn't know that. It's pretty fascinating. So he gets a psychologist in there and he's trying to figure this out. Now he's reached this crux. He's like, we've got, how many weeks? Was it 4 weeks to nationals or something like that? And he's at a complete loss as to what in the world is going on, because he's kind of gone through what he usually goes through. And so, I don't, on the face of it's like, I don't know what he does differently. He's definitely got to make a decision now. But I think the really nice benefit of this case is looking at it in retrospect. I think we can all see those points. Like, well, maybe he didn't catch it up front, but maybe he could have done the team building when they started the psychology and the complaint. Maybe there were little intersections that we can learn from and that he can learn from. And that's kind of the value of the case study, is to be able to recognize where the breakdown happened and how it might be prevented in the future, which is interesting. So we need to work on a list, and we're going to decide what the coach is actually going to do and why. So what was it? A couple of things. I mean, so at this point, we're just going to accept they are where they are. We, Joseph's expressed, maybe there's no way out of this. So the coach is going to make a decision. So we're going to make that decision for him. We're going to just make a list and then decide on what we think the best approach is. So we're going to make a decision. It's Tuesday morning. What do you do with your varsity team? What do you think, Marlea? Yeah, 4 weeks to nationals and just whatever. And try to think out of the box. Just think of something you might do as the coach.
This is the Tuesday, the 4 weeks before, not
Yep.
the.
Yep.
Okay. I don't know if I would have them practice rowing until they were able to communicate with each other. I think I would take the sport completely out of it and have that be their goal to work back towards.
What specifically would you do?
Have them build something together. Give them no plans and make them build a doghouse. I don't know,
Okay.
something that's going to take,
Nice.
thinking together.
Okay, what are some of the what are some of the pros you expect out of that? Anybody. What do you think are some of the pros of this solution?
Camaraderie. I think like doing service or building something together. I think it might finally help them instill that sense of brothership that they're looking for in a team.
Okay. Anyone else? Pros?
Well, in one place it said they lost faith. And maybe if they did something outside of racing, they'd build faith and be more motivated.
Okay, what about cons? Does anybody see any possible cons to getting them together to build something or to do something together?
The only con I would see from a sport perspective is that they wouldn't be actually practicing or conditioning. So, if it's 4 weeks, possibly,
Time is a problem, right?
Exactly. Depending on how long it might take, what if it takes them, 2 or 3 weeks before they finally feel comfortable with one another?
Right.
Yeah, this might be a good option to help with the future camaraderie. Like it's a good investment for like future seasons maybe. But then I agree with the con that you're not practicing, what you're going to be doing in a few weeks.
Okay, Devin, so we'll move it to you. What do you think you should do?
I just think he should have the JV move to varsity if they're making better times.
And anybody, what are your thoughts on that, guys? What are the pros and cons of him just switching the two teams? What are the pros? We'll talk pros.
They'd win the competition.
Maybe. We also know that the varsity team was faster and had slowed down. So the varsity team may have good times, but they may not have good national times. So we don't know. A con might be that they don't have good national times, even though they're beating the current varsity. What are some other pros? What are some pros of this? The JV does better, they might win.
A pro that I see from it is that JV did move up, then they could use that as a learning experience for future JV teams, or varsity teams. Like if you work hard enough, or if you don't work hard enough, this is what could happen.
Do you think though that I was thinking, well, as you were saying that could affect trust? That if I don't perform, then there's like a fear factor. Do you want to replace, because fear and trust don't live in the same house? Yeah. Do you think, guys, that switching them would change future teams' trust with the, because August is the time, right? August is the time where we figure it out. They spend all this time, they decide, and then knowing in the back of your head, well, that could change in spring. Is there a pro or a con there? What do you think?
Yeah, it frustrates everyone.
Do you think, or do you think they would be motivating? If you guys have been on a team, does anybody have an example they can think of?
My son's on a soccer team right now, on the JV soccer team, and he's a 10th grader, and they just moved up 2 of the 9th graders to the varsity team. That's frustrating to him.
He's interesting.
Worked hard.
But is that a motivating factor? Maybe it's both.
Maybe discouraged because I'm not doing this next year.
Oh, really? He's just like, I don't. Yeah. So it can be a pro and a con, maybe.
He doesn't appreciate me. That's what he says.
Wow.
I've kind of seen that in high school sports too. I played football, and obviously there were some people that were more talented than me. So there were a couple of freshmen that would play varsity football. But one thing I never noticed is the coach. Just because the JV team was having a better season, he wouldn't take the varsity team and switch them with the JV team. He would never do that. If anything, his mindset to me was just, well, we'll have a great varsity team next year, because next year we're going to have all these JV boys moving up. So it does kind of that program organization and that sense of trust. I think, maybe, I mean, this might not be what he wants to hear, or his boss or the athletic director, but maybe just take it for what it is. Maybe just have a really bad varsity year.
Lose. Yeah.
But next year you're going to have an awesome you're going to have an awesome JV team moving up to varsity that have instilled great rowing techniques, have built that unity with one another, and maybe it'll just be right back onto a championship.
It's a good discussion, because Devin, I completely was on your just switch them. If they're going to be better, just switch them. But the more I listen, I'm like, maybe they just deserve to be the best JV team that year, and they're going to rock the world the next year. So.
Yeah, now I agree with Joseph.
All right. Let's see. So who'd like to go next? Who would like to give us a solution? Joseph, you want to give us a solution?
Yeah. So a solution I was thinking of is that the coach within the varsity team, he could just try switching the bow and the stroke seats. So we kind of learned that the bow and the stroke seats are the two most important positions in a 8-man rowing team. For the bow seat, it says in the description in our case study that the bow seats are people that are typically described as self-motivated and are loners. And I don't remember real thoroughly, but I think there was a guy on there that was a little bit kind of out of the group. So, I mean, maybe you could put him in the bow, and then it's the stroke seat. It says the stroke seat is the person that's crucial for setting the rhythm. They're not as strong as the other teammates, but they're the most consistent with their techniques. So, maybe you could try switching around some of those positions. Those are the two most important seats in the entire rowing team. Seeing if maybe having someone in the stroke seat that's really good at their technique, not exactly the strongest person, and then maybe replacing someone in the bow. I think that maybe that could help self-motivate or even improve their times or their efficiency.
What are pros, guys? What do we hear? What do we see as pros on this one? I mean, it's obviously a physical fix in a way, like that. There's some lack of. It's a kind of a mix of the mental. You mentioned the loner portion. Kind of getting the right personality in the boat, like on those two spots. What are some pros?
If you have one positive person that sort of leads you and encourages everyone else, they can improve the mood of the team.
Good, you get a leader.
What's the coxswain? Is that the leader? Cox. How do you say that? Cox.
I think that's right, coxswain. Yeah. So you could provide. It's lacking leadership, so it could provide a leader, right? How does it affect the JV team, pro or con? Putting those other two people on the JV boat.
Oh, I wasn't implying to move anyone from the JV team. I was just saying within the varsity team, I was thinking that maybe they could try
switching. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you were switching boats.
No.
Okay.
So this would just be the varsity team. So I remember he did, some logging and everything, but I wonder, we don't really know, when they were most efficient. I wonder if maybe switching someone between the bow and the stroke seat, if maybe that would just help improve.
So what might be some cons to switching people around in their positions at this point?
Is that what he did first, by having two at a time? Testing.
I think he was just trying to gauge where the weakness was physically. What's going on, and why aren't these boats moving? Who's the weak link?
Mm-hmm.
I just think, they've been training for so long. I wonder how hard it is to switch positions. I don't know. And I know there's physical aspects of that too. That would be my only concern. Okay, Janie, what do you think? What's a good fix?
Oh, I thought in the very beginning he tested them several different ways. 2 different rowers compared to 2 different rowers. Where was that at?
Well, we're going to, instead of going to the beginning, we're just going to talk about what he does after all the problems have occurred. So just what's the solution after all the problems have occurred? So he's getting up Tuesday morning. He's got to make a critical decision about national competition. What does he decide? So far,
he liked what Joseph said, but move one of the coxswain or whatever, the leader of the row team.
Okay, so we have 3 really interesting decisions. One is just get them together to do something besides practice. Go build a doghouse. Go clean up a park. But actually, I like the idea of building something where they have to work together, not separately. That it demands the teamwork. So we have take out the sport part of it and just have them work together. switch the two teams, and switch the positions in the boat. So as a group, which one, after discussing this, would you say this is what our group decides? This is what we're going to do?
I thought that when you said let them fail, let the JV win the next year.
Okay. Anybody have a thought on what they think will be most effective? We're coach. We get to be coach. 5 brains get to be coach. Are we going to switch positions on the boat? Or are we going to have them kind of step out of the sports arena for a minute and do a project? I'm not going to answer because I know what happened. So I'm not going to say anything. I get to tell you what actually what happens next. So
I sort of looked ahead too.
Oh, bad Janie. It's really interesting. It'll be interesting to discuss, but I kind of don't want to. I have been influenced. I've been influenced by my knowledge. So, what do you think you'd want to pick?
I think if you have maybe a short building project team thing, and then do what Joseph said of do both, switch people around, and hopefully that will maintain whatever trust is left.
Maybe you can even do it in succession. Try a short thing, see how that, put them on the boat. But again, my biggest concern about the switching is I don't know enough about what their different positions are responsible for physically. That switching a spot would, retraining in a different position, how in 4 weeks, I don't know how that would go, but that would be my only concern about that one. But do you think they have time for both? If you had to pick one, what would you pick?
The trust building?
I'd pick switch.
So who votes switching?
I think I would.
Okay.
I would too.
Okay. And Marley, you like your doghouse? Marley's going to stay with the doghouse. And there is no right and wrong here. There's no, we will find out what he did and whether or not it worked. But I think that really some of the lessons learned here, I wrote a couple of them down. That one, the coach being able to identify what kind of conflict it was and where to intercede, to recognize that at some point it started to spiral downwards and it was moving down fast and he had to find a way to turn it around, and maybe he wouldn't be able to. That the JV team, positive things head up and negative things head down, that there wasn't really anything in between, and that the interpersonal dynamics were highly affecting these two teams is really important to point out. So let me read what happened. Bringing tensions out into the open and then resolving them is one of the team leader's most important jobs. Colonel Stas Przewski, coach of the Army crew at West Point a few years ago, faced a baffling problem. Through extensive testing, he had developed objective criteria to rank his rowers. He then put the 8 best, his dream team, in the varsity boat and the 8 others in the junior varsity boat. The problem, the JV beat the varsity 2/3 of the time. The situation, as explained in a Harvard Business School case, was that the varsity was full of resentment over who was contributing most, while the JV, feeling they had nothing to lose, supported one another happily. One day, Przewski lined up the varsity crew in 4 pairs. He told them they were to wrestle, no punching, for 90 seconds. There were no clear winners. Each man was discovering that his opponent was just as strong and determined as he was. Przewski then had them change opponents and wrestle again. By the 3rd round, they were choosing their own opponents. One guy would point and say, "You," Przewski says. Finally, one of the rowers started laughing. They all piled into a general brawl. Eventually, someone said, "Coach, can we go row now?" From then on, the varsity boat flew. You probably can't order members of an executive team to wrestle, tempting though it may be, but bringing tensions out in the open and then resolving them is one of a team leader's important jobs. They wrestled. I thought, okay. Kind of a similar thing to, I think, it was a team building experience. What was he teaching them? What do you think about his solution?
I didn't think it was very good. It won't work in my husband's office, a dental office, where they're all women. They can't.
Well, there's other methods to get tensions out in the open than wrestling. Agreed. He recognized.
I like it though.
Yeah, he recognized it was appropriate for this situation.
Yeah.
For the key being, there's tension, and I'll just share what I thought.
Frustration.
I thought somehow, and maybe he didn't see it, but in retrospect, I'm thinking there was no great, huge problem going on. There wasn't like this massive issue. There was one issue that was spiraling out of control. There was some level of frustration that once he got them past it, they were like, okay, I got it. Something was hanging on. Somebody, what is it when you hang on to something and you don't let it go? You let it eat at you, and it's whatever. Anyway, what do you guys think? Why do you think it worked?
I thought it worked for men, but it doesn't work for women. They can argue and get upset, and they hold on to it. Men can let it go.
We need to wrestle longer. Is that what you're saying, Jamie?
I think it's interesting because it's like releasing your emotion, and I've had people, like in counseling and stuff, I've heard the aspect of like, if you have troubles in your life, you write it down on a plate and then you throw the plate down and you break the plate, and it's supposed to make you feel better. In a sense, what they're getting to do is, instead of writing their issues on a plate, they're able to wrestle like this person that they haven't gotten along with. And sometimes just physically releasing, like sometimes if you feel troubled, sometimes going on a run or going to the gym, that's kind of a common cure for a lot of people when they're stressed or when they're upset. They go and they do something physical to kind of release that tension. So I'm kind of thinking that was kind of a good exercise, even though I would have been a little bit concerned if it had gotten a little too rowdy. But like
it could have gone bad. It could have gone really poorly. Yeah.
With all that quarreling they did in the boat, I'm surprised, someone didn't lose their teeth or, something like that.
It could have. I'm hoping that he knew him well enough to, it could have gone really poorly. It could have gone downhill. Why do you think they learned about each other? What was happening?
They saw that they're physical, like you said, they were matched physically to some degree. So they're able to see where each other is coming from. So like in the business world, that would be putting that out in the open, putting the problem out in the open, and then just talking about where you're coming from. And everyone sees, your point of view.
My husband and I had a long talk. We go on walks in the morning and in the dark at 4 a.m. It's nice and lonely and no cars. And we talked quite a bit about this, and he was talking about conflict at work, and one of the things that came out was the need of information. This exercise gave them information that they could, and that there's some conflicts he's having at work, and he decided, maybe I just don't have enough information. I need more information before I make decisions about people. And so these team members were deciding, well, he's not pulling his weight and I'm pulling all the weight. And they realized, wait a minute, they got more information. We all are capable, and I agree with Joseph. Sometimes just the physical tension that builds up over time, my husband says he just feels so frustrated. He just wants to vent, but he doesn't want to vent at work because he knows it's not productive. So he's got to find some productive way to vent. And for these people, he chose wrestling. He thought that was an appropriate way to vent. So what's an appropriate way to get that information when there's a lot of frustration in a business setting, or like in what Janie said, in like a dentist office? What's a tool that you can use? How can you apply this?
Something, I took a leadership class, healthcare strategy class, and my teacher talked about some type of executive that was over physicians, brought all the physicians for the organization in a room and had them write on a whiteboard what their frustrations were. And over time, like everyone went up and wrote on the board, and then slowly they all like said, oh, that relates to this, and got their frustrations down to like just a few bullet points. And so they were all able to see what their frustrations were with each other, with administration, and that way they could coordinate with administration what needed to change. That was a really good way of doing it, just getting people, we all know we're frustrated. What are you frustrated about? And hopefully, well, not hopefully, but people will probably be frustrated about the same things.
I think you make a great point about that. In order to accomplish that, you have to have a leader, some level of leadership that says, you can say anything you need to say here. They've got to be able to go in feeling like I can say what needs to be said. I don't have to worry about, repercussions for my frustration at this point. We can just air stuff out. How does that work in a dentist office, Janie?
I don't know. It seems hard because when everybody's frustrated, they suddenly just blow, and then they turn on the coach like the dentist and say it's all your fault. So yeah, it's hard to know how to.
Does it? So does this
let it go or to let
does this,
everybody blow?
does this case? It kind of makes me wish. Does this case make you think? Okay, what's the real problem? We see what the effect of the problem is, but we don't know what the root is. That maybe that opportunity to sit down and ask questions and find out, ask the right questions, find out the root, and before you try to fix something, because you may be spending time fixing something that's not broken.
All comes down to trust, probably.
Probably does.
They can trust each other.
Joseph, Marlea, do you have anything to add to that? Your thoughts on what his solution was?
So I mean, this might kind of come off as cheating, I guess, because we're talking about applying this in a business setting, but they do have actual team building consultants, and some companies will actually invest in these people to come in during a lunch, or they'll just take an hour off of work, they'll close down the office, they'll have these people come in and they'll actually do team building exercises with you and your employees. And I was kind of looking, and I was looking on a website, and some people, that even just have activities. So I'm on a website right now. It's called Refresh Leadership, and it's 6 quick teamwork games to engage your employees at work. And it goes through all 6 of these, and it goes through the background of the game, what it concentrates on, and what you should see as a result from it. So, I mean, there's a lot of different options, on the web or different consulting offices that you could use in the professional workplace.
My husband's manager has been tasked with working on team building activities, and he's went to some team building conferences, and they came back and they planned this team activity that nobody wanted to go to. My husband was so glad he was going to be out of town. We were going to be on vacation. And the people that went, oh my gosh, that was so dumb. And it was so contrived, and they hated it. And then a couple weeks later, they went out during lunchtime to play volleyball. And their manager was out there with them, and he kind of was observing. And he was just like, He let them play for an hour and a half. And before you know it, there's an email saying, hey, we're doing volleyball again on Friday. So it's interesting, because some of those things you got to say, and he was like, why did we even do that dumb thing? I'm like, if you learned from it, is it dumb? He's like, here's something we tried to implement, didn't work, try something else. Oh, look, this works. There's something going on here I maybe can't identify. Let's keep this going. So his task next is, what do you do when it starts to snow? You can't go out and play volleyball. But an interesting thing, though, for a manager to tap into what works for his team. Marlea, do you have anything to add?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I just like that there's so many different ways to specifically look at different issues going on. There's so many ways to specialize.
Yeah. I just think one of my favorite things about this was that struggle of, what's the problem? What's the real problem? Probably happened back in winter conditioning. We have no idea, but there's something anyway that it made me look at things a little differently when, some issues, just ask questions, get the right answer. So what's the most important thing you learned from the case? These are the last 4 questions. It's the final wrap up. So if we can be brief with the final wrap up, so we can discuss the Doohickeys problem just for a minute, if that's okay. So most important thing learned. We'll just start with Devin.
I guess I knew that they wrestled beforehand. I've talked about this before. And so I think that the best thing I learned is, just to get things out in the open. And relating to last week's, I think it was last week's reading with Elder Bednar and the talk on leadership, that nobody cares about the credit, but you care about getting it right. That whatever the problem is, you just have to keep trying different solutions, like you said, to come, or different solutions to come up with the ultimate solution.
Go ahead, Janie.
Oh, me?
Yeah, most important thing learned.
I thought it was interesting how important a team is, how to work as a team, what a small difference it can make in your team if you're working together, and how much stronger you can be if you work as a team.
I especially appreciate that in the terms of the upward spiral or the downward spiral. You know, at some point you've got to stop that downward spiral and figure out how to get it and go in the other direction. Go ahead, Joseph. What do you think? Most important thing?
I think probably the most important thing would just be that I've learned is it is important to have leaders. It's important to have a sense of leadership early on and have a leader that people can confide in. And I think that's something that was missing, is that the boys, or I should say the men, they really didn't have anyone that they confided in. I think just a sense of leadership and also a sense of just kind of like, I don't know, sense of unity. I think those are important things that I think really attribute to success in the workplace or in any other field.
Thanks. Marleya? Pardon.
What I learned that was most important, I think, is that it's never too late to try. Like, it doesn't matter if the deadline is in 4 days or 4 weeks or 4 hours. It can't do any damage. You can only improve.
I was kind of thinking on the same things, that kind of identifying what failure is. Failure is only failure if you quit. You know, that you keep working towards something, you learn from what's in front of you, and you just keep pounding it out, and figuring it out. So kind of in the same vein. The next question is to rate our overall quality of our discussion today from 0 to 10. So we'll just go ahead, same order. Devin, 0 to 10, just quality of our discussion.
I think 10.
Janie?
Yeah, I think 10. It had me change some of the viewpoints I had.
Yeah, me too. That's what it's supposed to do. Joseph?
10.
Yeah. Marleya?
10.
Yeah, I think so too. This is a good group. So far, so good, guys.
You're a good leader, that's why, huh?
Well, that's the next question. What did the discussion leader do that you liked? Something we can repeat as we go on?
You're prepared.
I like that you delegated better than most people. So I like that, you asked a question and then you assigned it, rather than just asking a question and having there be just blank moments of silence.
Well, it told me to, but I followed instructions. Yay! It worked.
There you go. You followed instructions.
Any other thoughts? Okay. The last one is what?
The case, huh? You'd read the information.
Pardon?
So you read the information, so you were prepared.
And then what could I do better next time? Because I have to do it next week too. And don't be afraid. I like some good criticism. Some, what is it called? Constructive criticism.
I don't know. I really don't.
You couldn't have done it better.
Either.
I'm perfect. Perfectly, practically perfect in every way. Oh, I moderated a meeting right before this one too, so I had some practice right beforehand. All right, so we just have a couple minutes to talk about the doohickey thing. Has anybody read it?
I did.
Yeah, I have.
You read instructions for the doohickey project?
I've only read part of it. I haven't read it all the way through yet.
Okay, I'll just run it by you real quick. It's due.
This one we only have to do it at the end of week 5. Is that?
Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. It's due the end of week 5. The process we probably should start right now and just work it piecemeal if everyone agrees with that. I'll tell you what's in the process. Identify the HR problems in the case, choose 3 and describe them in detail. Brainstorm 4 possible solutions per problem, so 12 solutions in all. Write a paragraph describing each of the solutions with specifics and include reading support. Once that's complete, pick the most important thing to focus on, why it's the key issue, discuss the pros and cons and obstacles, then show deep reflection and application of the content studied in our class that helps solve the problem or develop a solution. Give a detailed account that explains why this particular issue is the highest priority, and then include detailed information about how you will implement a solution. So you can see there's a process. We can do it via any method that we want. We can email, text, have a group meeting at some point, something to think about. Maybe we can like send some emails back and forth and kind of get a feel for how we want to go about that. In the end, it's about a 3,500 word document. There's an example listed. We can like take portions to write, but we do have to at least come to some agreement about what the main problems are and how to solve them, and then assign, typing that up and compiling it, etc. I don't know how to use the thing where you can share a document and I'll work on the document at the same time. Does anybody know how to do that?
It's for a Google document, right?
I guess.
So I think what you do, I haven't done it in a while, but I might be able to do that. What it is I would just provide you all a link, and I would post it in my Google Documents, and then it's free to edit for anyone.
Okay. So maybe we could start a document with just what are the main problems. We can all go in and say, here's what we think the main problems are, and then we can just agree on 3 of them, and then kind of move along using the document as our guide and kind of write it as it goes. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so I think good organization for that would be everyone kind of create their own document rather than just compiling it all into one at first. So maybe we could all come up with our own solutions, and then we could kind of try to organize it into one document. Because if it all just kind of gets thrown into one document, it kind of gets hard to read, hard to really organize. So if we all made our own separate document and then we just attached it to that Google document, we could kind of create our own from those problems.
Or we could even just email. We could even email what we think the problems are, and then just incorporate the 3 main ones into one document, if we want.
And then for choosing our 3 problems, is that something we wanted to talk about over email, or is that something we want to wait to do next week during our video?
Oh, that's a great point. We could all like come up with what the problems are and discuss them via email, and then decide the 3 in our discussion, and then go on from there. How do you guys feel about that?
Every week do you get a different doohickey problem, or does it build?
No, we're building this. So we could discuss the problems this week, the solutions.
Next week we'll get a different problem?
No, we can discuss the problems this week and the solutions next week.
Oh.
And then we can talk about the final stuff. Because our meeting's early in the week, will probably give us time to wrap it up. I think, there's enough of us. It shouldn't be too bad. It's just the communication part. So I don't know, Joseph, do you want to just send, I don't know, do you want to just send out a primary email to just start discussing, read through it, and we can all come up with that? Do you want to do that?
Yeah,
Would you
sure.
mind?
So maybe do we want to have that done by have all of our problems that we think by Friday, something like that, or do we want to have it by Thursday? Or?
Yeah, sure. If we nail down the 3 problems and even the issues, we'll see how much we can get done via email and just touch base at our meeting, because obviously our meeting needs to wrap up. So.
And we send it to Joseph?
Well, if Joseph just sends us all out an email, we can just respond, keep it all in the same thread.
All right.
So Joseph can send us out an email, and we can just respond to the single thread, read over it, choose what you think the main issues, what the issues are, and then we can kind of, maybe even just from reading it, say, oh, we all kind of generally agree on these 3 things, and then we can discuss solutions and go from there. And maybe next week we could even just talk about separating out the write-up. So, all right. Good deal. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, just sorry, Yasmin was never able to connect. She sent a text, hopefully you guys got it, of an image of what her screen was saying. So I'm going to try to make an effort to see if I can't get her into a Google Hangout between now and next week to see if we can't solve those issues. But please remember to send something on to her. And then if anybody understands the screenshot that she took, that would be great, because she sent it to the whole group. But I will try to get her in a Google, so we can figure out what her technical issues are. And I think to kind of help her from missing this first meeting, if each of us can just pop in on an email and say, hey, sorry you missed the meeting. Here's some of the stuff we discussed. I know it's a little extra work, but so that she isn't left out of this a little bit.
Of our team.
I think it was hard in the interim trying to lead this and trying to figure out the technical issues she was dealing with. So making sure that she has that connection. And of course, she can watch this video. I'll post it to our Google. I'll let her know that it's posted and to please review it. And I'll try to get with her during the week. I'll maybe call her on the phone or see if we can't figure out how we can get her in the next meeting. So sound good?
All right.
So everybody watch for Joseph's email and maybe shoot something out to Yasmin. All right. Danke.
All right.
Have a nice afternoon, everyone.
Thanks.
You too.